The CFO summoned me into the glass conference room with that familiar, manufactured smile, the one people wear when they're about to hand you an insult wrapped in corporate jargon. I'd barely taken a seat when he gestured to the 23-year-old lounging in his chair like a bored prince. "This is my son, Daniel," he said. "He'll be overseeing your department effective immediately. I need you to acknowledge his authority." The kid didn't even look up from his phone. Just smirked, like he already owned me. And for a second, I actually felt the sting. Years of work, dozens of systems built from scratch, millions saved through the processes I personally designed, all pushed aside so some legacy admission with a business degree from a school his father donated to could feel important. But the CFO had forgotten something tiny, buried, harmless-looking. Something he signed during the acquisition 2 years ago because he was too busy bragging about his negotiation skills to read what I'd drafted into the continuity protection clause. And if he wanted a power play, well, I had one locked, loaded, and notarized. I kept my voice steady. "Of course. If you'd like his authority acknowledged, I'm happy to provide written confirmation. You'll just need to sign off on it for legal consistency with my contract." He waved his hand like I was babbling. Fine, send it." I did. And the moment he electronically countersigned with that sloppy, half-drunky signature he always used, the trigger activated. Any restructuring that inserted new oversight above my position without board vote automatically granted me full severance activation, 2 years' salary, 3% equity payout, and, most importantly, release from all non-compete and intellectual property restrictions. The systems I designed, the forecasting engine, the compliance pipeline, the vendor risk matrix, were mine again. Company-owned until the clause fired. And it just had. I walked out of the conference room with the same calm smile I'd perfected over a decade of watching executives think they were clever. It took the CFO 53 minutes to figure out what happened. I know because that's when my phone exploded with calls, then texts, then increasingly desperate emails. The payout alone would drain the emergency liquidity fund he'd been hiding from the board. Worse, the equity transfer was mandatory and immediate. That meant dilution. That meant angry board members calling him, not me. But the real bloodletting came from my freedom to walk away with the architecture I'd built, my architecture. Without it, compliance reporting would collapse within weeks, regulatory deadlines would be missed, and the audit they'd been sweating bullets over would suddenly become a financial crime scene. His son could oversee whatever he wanted. Without me, he'd be overseeing a smoldering crater. When I returned to the office the next morning, contractually required for the final walkout, the whole place buzzed like a disturbed hive. The CFO looked like he hadn't slept, tie crooked, face pale in a way expensive lighting couldn't fix. "You blindsided me," he said, voice ragged. "You tricked me." I leaned in just a bit. "No. I protected myself from exactly the sort of stunt you tried to pull." His son hovered behind him, suddenly much quieter than the boy king from the day before. Not a smirk on him now. If anything, he avoided my eyes, as if they reflected something unpleasant, like accountability. By noon, HR had processed my departure and my final payout hit the account. The CFO tried one last time to claw his dignity together, insisting the systems I'd built belonged to the company. I simply forwarded him the clause, highlighted, bolded, with the timestamp of his signature glowing like a courtroom spotlight. His jaw flexed, then sagged. He knew it was airtight. He'd agreed to it. He'd activated it. And now he was stuck presenting to the board why the company's internal risk engine had evaporated along with a senior manager he'd tried to kneecap for the sake of nepotism. I walked out with my box of things, though truthfully, I didn't need the box. The real prize was the leverage. Over the next month, I rebuilt my systems independently, cleaner, faster, fortified. 3 other companies bid for them. One offered a leadership role plus licensing rights. Another offered double that, with a team of my choosing. The third made me an offer that would make the CFO's eyes bleed. I took it. And when my new employer later acquired my old one, as struggling, cornered companies often are, the CFO wasn't around for the transition. The board had removed him 2 weeks before. Failure of fiduciary judgment, the memo said. As for his son, last I heard, he'd returned to grad school. Under supervision this time. And me? Every morning I walk into an office where respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And no one, not even a CFO with a silver spoon successor, will ever mistake my work for something they can casually control again. Security let me onto the old campus during the acquisition transition about 6 months later. Not because I needed to be there, my systems were already in place at the acquiring company, but because the new CTO wanted me to walk through the legacy infrastructure and point out what could be salvaged. Honestly, I thought the place would feel triumphant, like walking back into the arena I'd escaped. But instead, it felt small. Stale. Like someone had shut all the windows and let the air settle. The hum of panic that once lived in those hallways had been replaced with something worse, resignation. People stared when they saw me. A few nodded, quietly grateful. A few looked away, embarrassed for reasons that weren't mine to carry. One or two smirked, realizing the poetic twist. They thought I'd left in disgrace, only to find out I was now the one helping decide the future of their entire operation. Corporate karma isn't always quick, but when it arrives, it doesn't knock, it just walks right in. The finance department was in the worst shape. The interim controller, a woman who'd been buried under the CFO's ego for years, pulled me aside. You know, she whispered, after you left, everything started falling apart. He tried to rebuild your systems from guesswork. It was like watching someone reassemble a plane midair with instructions written on napkins. She laughed, but it was tired. Auditors nearly set up camp here. We were days away from a shutdown violation. I didn't gloat. I could have. God knows the CFO would have. But I just nodded. I made them as robust as I could, I said, but they weren't designed to run without upkeep. She smiled in that way someone smiles when they've been carrying a truth alone for too long. They weren't designed to run without you. The CTO found me reviewing a wall of outdated server logs. Walk me through what your successor did, he said. My successor? I frowned. He chuckled. The CFO's kid. He didn't last 2 weeks after you left. Tried to implement some efficiency overhaul he found on a productivity blog. Broke the entire reporting pipeline. It took 3 contractors to undo the damage. That actually made me pause. Not out of schadenfreude, I'd gotten my fill of that, but because it confirmed something I'd spent years suspecting. Most corporate disasters don't come from malice or incompetence alone. They come from the misplaced confidence of people who think a title is the same as understanding. We toured the upper floor last. The CFO's old office was empty, a hollow glass box with a stunning skyline view and absolutely no power left inside it. His nameplate was gone. His shelves were bare except for one forgotten binder lying on the floor, dust settling on the cover. I picked it up. It was his own personal transition plan, a mess of half-finished thoughts, outdated charts, and notes scribbled like a man trying to outrun his own failings. The final page had a single question scrawled across it: how did I lose control of my own company? I put the binder back exactly where I found it. Some answers a man has to find without help. As we wrapped up, the CTO extended a hand. Good work today. And for what it's worth, that clause you put in your contract? Smartest piece of corporate self-defense I've ever seen. I shook his hand. I didn't write it to be clever. I wrote it because I saw who he was long before he saw who I was. When I stepped outside into the afternoon air, I didn't feel triumph or vindication. I felt clarity. That chapter was done. I'd survived it, outmaneuvered it, and outgrew it. And sometimes that's the real revenge, not watching someone fall, but walking away tall enough that you never have to look down again. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a quiet corner office of my new company, the kind of office no one ever gives you as a consolation prize, when I got an unexpected call from an unknown number. Normally, I ignore those. But something in me said take it. A hesitant voice came through. "Hi, this is Daniel, the CFO's son." I leaned back, letting the silence stretch long enough for him to feel it. The kid who once couldn't even make eye contact was calling me now, alone, unarmored, and probably a little humbler than before. "What do you need, Daniel?" I asked. He exhaled shakily. "I just wanted to understand everything that happened. My dad always told me you were the problem. That you were difficult, territorial. That you held the department hostage with your systems." He paused. "But after everything fell apart, after he got forced out, I started thinking maybe I never saw the truth. I didn't rescue him from the discomfort. Growth rarely comes wrapped in comfort." "Daniel," I said, "your father wasn't a bad accountant. He was a bad leader. He thought authority flowed downward. That fear was a management tool. He never realized that what makes people listen to you is the value you bring, not the title printed on your door." He was quiet a long time. I almost ended the call until he said something I didn't expect. "You know, I didn't want that job. I wasn't ready." He pushed me into it and told me this was how it works. That people like you should just obey. There it was, the crack in the armor. Not malice. Not arrogance. Just a kid shoved into power and taught the wrong lessons by the wrong mentor. "You're not your father," I said. "But if you act like him, people will treat you like him." Another long pause, then, "Can I ask you something? How did you learn all this? How to build systems? How to negotiate? How to read people? How to survive corporate politics?" "By getting burned," I said plainly. "By watching people who thought they were untouchable make the same mistakes over and over. And by deciding early that I wasn't going to lose my soul just to climb a ladder that someone else could kick at any time." "Could you teach me?" he asked quietly. That actually surprised me. Not because he didn't need it, he desperately did, but because self-awareness is the one currency you can't gift someone. They have to earn it. "I can give you one piece of advice," I said. "Start at the bottom somewhere, anywhere. Learn real work. Understand what it takes to build something before you try to manage people who do. Don't chase titles. Chase competence. You do that, and eventually, the right people will take a chance on you." He didn't argue. Didn't posture. Just said, "Thank you," and disconnected. I stared out my office window for a moment, watching the city move like a breathing organism, messy, loud, full of ambition, and full of people who think they're smarter than the ones actually carrying the weight. Then I turned back to my desk, to the team I was growing, the systems I was refining, and the future I was building with people who valued substance over ego. Corporate revenge isn't always about crushing someone. Sometimes, the deepest revenge is simply outlasting them, outgrowing them, and becoming someone they never expected you to be. And that's when the email came in, from the CEO. Short message. Direct. "Ready to talk about the expansion project? Need someone who knows how to build empires the right way." Funny thing is, after everything I'd been through, I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about legacy. The expansion project turned out to be far bigger than I'd imagined. New markets, new architecture, a full-scale rebuild of the company's operational backbone. The kind of challenge that either cements your name in stone or buries you quietly under expectations. And the CEO wasn't asking me to contribute, he was asking me to run it. For the first time in a long while, I felt something different from the cautious ambition I'd carried for years. I felt ownership. The first leadership meeting put everything into perspective. The room was full of seasoned executives, sharp, confident, and unburdened by the kind of political theater I'd left behind. They didn't care who I had upset in my previous company. They didn't care about my title back then. They cared about what I could build now. Halfway through the meeting, the COO leaned forward. "Your system design is impressive," she said. "You think like an engineer, but you negotiate like a lawyer. Where'd you learn that balance?" I smiled. I had 10 years of practice dealing with people who underestimated me. A few laughed knowingly. They'd been in those kinds of trenches before. By the end of the day, they'd given me a team of 14 analysts, architects, and operators. Real talent. Hungry, curious, unpoliticized. Exactly the sort of people you can build something great with. And then, during the final hour, the CEO pulled me aside to a smaller conference room. "You've been carrying old battles on your shoulders," he said. Not accusingly, just observantly. "Let me give you something to replace them." He handed me a folder. Inside was my new title. Director. Full strategic autonomy. And a budget that made my old company look like a lemonade stand. "You earned this," he said. "Don't spend a minute thinking it was luck." I wasn't used to hearing that. Not from the top. Not sincerely. And it hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so long defending my work from people who wanted to control it that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be trusted with it. That night, after everyone had gone home, I stayed late in the office. Not out of obligation, but out of excitement. I spread out blueprints, frameworks, and planning documents across the table. The room was quiet except for the city hum past the windows and the soft clicking of my pen as I mapped out a system that would run smoother, smarter, and stronger than anything I'd built before. This wasn't survival anymore. This was legacy building. And then, life has a funny sense of timing, my inbox pinged with a familiar name. From Daniel Subject. "I took your advice." I opened it. He'd started an entry-level operations role at a mid-sized tech startup. No special treatment. No shortcuts. He said he'd been shocked by how much he didn't know, humbled by how much there was to learn. And he ended with something I didn't expect. "I used to think authority was something you inherit. Now I want to learn how to earn it. I'm going to try to do this right this time." I sat back in my chair, letting the words settle. A year ago, that kid had smirked at me from across a conference room, believing he had power over me. Now he was learning the kind of lessons no corner office could ever teach. He'd either rise or fall on his own merit, finally free from his father's shadow. And I realized something: revenge had already run its course. What was left was impact. Some people destroy their enemies. Some outgrow them. But the rarest kind leave such a mark that even the ones who once tried to control them end up learning from their blueprint. And that, I figured as I drafted my expansion proposal, might just be the best ending anyone could ask for. 2 months into the expansion project, something unexpected happened, something I couldn't have predicted even with all my planning instincts. The board called a full review session. Not the kind where they grill you, but the kind where every department presents progress, risks, and strategies. A benchmark moment. A career-defining moment. I was scheduled last. That alone told me the CEO had maneuvered this deliberately. When I walked into the boardroom, I recognized one face immediately, and almost laughed out loud. Sitting near the end of the table, not as a board member but as a representative from a consulting firm, was someone I never expected to cross paths with again, my former CFO. He was older, thinner, with a stiffness in his posture like he was permanently bracing for impact. And when he saw me, he froze. For a split second, his expression cracked, shock, recognition, and then something like dread. He tried to mask it, but the damage was done. Life, it seemed, had a wicked sense of humor. I didn't react. I didn't smirk. I didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he mattered enough to provoke a response. I simply took my seat, opened my binder, and waited for the meeting to proceed. Throughout the presentations, he kept sneaking glances at me. Either he was trying to gauge how much influence I had here, or he already knew. When my turn came, the CEO gave a small nod. "Take us home," he said. I stepped up to the front, connected my laptop, and launched the architecture for the expansion, my architecture. Clean systems. Seamless workflows. Predictive analytics tied to operational metrics. A blueprint not just for growth, but for resilience. The room was still as I walked through each phase. And then I showed the projections. Silence. Then sharp, focused attention. Then murmured approval. One board member adjusted his glasses. "This is an incremental improvement," he said. "This is industry shifting." Another leaned forward. "How long have you been working on this?" "A long time," I answered honestly. "Longer than you'd think." The CFO avoided my eyes completely now. When I finished, the CEO closed his folder. "Any questions for our director?" There weren't. Just quiet nods, impressed expressions, and one or two smiles that said, "We're betting on you." And then the CEO added something I didn't expect. "This entire architecture, this vision, was built by the person you just heard from. We didn't hire someone to lead the expansion. We hired someone to redefine it." The room broke into applause. And while I stayed composed, I won't lie, something in me steadied in a way it hadn't in years. On the way out, as the board filtered toward private discussions, the CFO approached slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal he was afraid would bite. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, voice low. Strained. "That makes two of us," I replied. He swallowed. "You've done well." "Clearly." He gestured vaguely toward the conference room. "I didn't realize you were the architect behind all that." I met his eyes. Not with anger, not with gloating, just the kind of calm someone earns after outgrowing the battlefield. "You never tried to," I said. "That was the problem." He flinched. For a moment, I saw something crack inside him, not defensiveness, not arrogance. Just regret. The kind that arrives late and unwanted, like a bill long overdue. "If I could redo things," he started. But I shook my head. "No reruns," I said. "We both played our part. But here's the difference: you thought power was a spotlight. I learned it was a foundation." He exhaled shakily, stepped back, and nodded. Not defeated, just finally, painfully aware. "Good luck," he said. "You too," I answered. And this time, I actually meant it. As I walked out of the building, something became very clear to me. Revenge wasn't the moment he fell. It wasn't the moment I rose. It wasn't even seeing him humbled. It was realizing I no longer needed any of it. I'd built something bigger than payback, something he could never take credit for, never overwrite, never bury. I'd built my career on my terms. And for the first time in a long while, I stepped into my future without anyone's shadow behind me. The weeks that followed moved fast: expansion approvals, budget releases, new teams onboarding. I'd gone from surviving corporate ambushes to shaping corporate strategy, and the shift was grounding. Not euphoric. Not surreal. Just solid. Like I was finally standing on a floor that wouldn't collapse under me. And then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, the CEO stopped by my office. He didn't knock. He never knocked. "Walk with me," he said. We headed down to the innovation floor, where prototypes, models, and early-stage concepts filled the open space. I thought he wanted my thoughts on something technical. Instead, he stopped by a table with 2 chairs, motioned for me to sit, and lowered his voice. "The board wants to accelerate the expansion timeline," he said. "They want a division built around your architecture. Not just a project, an entire arm of the company." That was big. Massive. But the CEO wasn't done. "They want you to run it." I leaned back. "A new division? That's not a promotion. That's a rebuild of the org chart." He smiled. "Exactly." But then his expression shifted, more serious, more intentional. "There's something else," he said. During the board review, one of the external consultants spoke with several directors afterward. I already knew where this was going. The CFO. My former CFO. "He told them he was impressed by you," the CEO continued. "He said he misjudged you. And he said, verbatim, if we'd listened to him earlier, our company would be in a very different place." I didn't react outwardly. But internally, yeah, that landed. Not because I needed his validation. Because it confirmed something I'd suspected. Sometimes the people who try to bury you end up becoming accidental witnesses to your rise. The CEO leaned forward. That kind of acknowledgement, from someone who once worked above you, tells me something important. You're not just here to build systems. You're here to build leaders. I took a breath. Slow. Centered. "So what are you asking?" "I'm asking you," he said, "to stop thinking like someone who escaped a bad company. And start thinking like someone who's ready to build a legacy inside a great one." He slid a document across the table. Executive Vice President, Systems and Strategy. My name printed cleanly under it. A seat at the top. A permanent one. I didn't grab the document. Didn't rush. I just let the weight of it settle. "Why now?" I asked. "Because," he said, "you've proven you don't need power to perform. Now I want to see what you can do with it." I thought of all the years I'd spent fighting off petty sabotage, silent politics, backdoor deals. All the time someone tried to diminish me so they could look taller. All the invisible bruises you earn working under leaders who treat talent like a threat. I thought of the CFO's smirk. His son's indifference. The clause he signed without reading. The day everything broke. And the day everything finally aligned. Then I thought of where I was now, trusted, respected, building something with real purpose. I signed. The CEO smiled like he'd expected nothing less. "Welcome to the future," he said. Later that night, when the office was empty and the city was humming below, I stood at my new window, a dozen floors higher than where I started, and realized something important. Revenge had been the spark. But purpose was the fuel. And now? Now I wasn't just rewriting my own story. I was building a place where no one would ever have to hide contract clauses to protect themselves, because they wouldn't need protection from the people above them. Legacy, I realized, wasn't what you left behind. It was what you built while you were still here. 6 months into leading the new division, our systems were rolling out across 3 continents. The numbers looked cleaner than any forecast we dared to predict, the error margins were microscopic, and teams across the company were finally operating with a clarity they'd never had before. And people noticed. But the moment that really changed everything wasn't about metrics, or projections, or the board's applause. It was a moment that came quietly, on an ordinary morning, delivered in the form of a simple email from a domain I didn't immediately recognize. From Daniel subject, "You were right." I opened it with no expectations. Inside was a short message, but it carried more weight than some executive memos I'd seen in my life. I thought starting at the bottom would break me. It didn't. It rebuilt me. The job is hard, but honest. And I'm learning. I mean really learning. Thanks for pushing me toward the path I never would have chosen on my own. Beneath that was an attached screenshot, an internal announcement welcoming him to his startup's operations strategy team, his first real promotion. No help from his father. No shortcuts. No inherited authority. He earned it. I leaned back in my chair, letting a quiet satisfaction settle over me, not triumph, not vindication. Just the sense that something had corrected itself in the world. A younger version of me, the one who spent too long watching bad leaders rise through charm instead of competence, would have called this justice. But now, it felt more like restoration. Later that afternoon, the CEO called me into his office. He didn't bother with formalities. He simply spun his monitor toward me, showing a single headline on an industry news site: "Mid-sized consultancy restructures after client losses and leadership turmoil." My former CFO's firm. I didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Didn't revel in the poetic symmetry of it. I just nodded. "Saw it coming," I said. The CEO studied me for a moment. "No satisfaction?" "There is," I said. "Just not the kind that comes from someone else failing." He nodded slowly, understanding. "You've grown." I shrugged. Or maybe I finally stopped wasting energy on people who never learn from their own mistakes. He laughed. "Well, keep that clarity. I need you sharp." Then his tone shifted. "We've got a problem. A big one. And I want you leading the response." He laid the numbers out: a bottleneck in our European expansion. A regulatory change that threatened to slow everything to a crawl. Millions at stake. The kind of issue that keeps executives awake at night. But for me, this was familiar ground. This was the kind of battlefield I understood. And I felt strangely calm. "I'll handle it," I said. Over the next month, I built a specialized task force: cross-border analysts, legal experts, process architects. The kind of team that doesn't exist unless someone with authority knows how to assemble one. Not people who take orders blindly, but people who think. People who innovate. People who trust. We solved the issue in record time. Faster than the board expected. Faster than our competitors could even attempt. And when the dust settled, I finally saw it fully. My influence had outgrown the small corner where my former CFO once tried to cage me. My voice had weight. My decisions shaped divisions. My experience had become a blueprint others followed. A few weeks later, the CEO invited me to dinner with him, the COO, and 2 board members. Halfway through the night, the COO raised her glass. "To the future EVP," she said. I blinked. "I'm already EVP." The CEO shook his head, smiling. "No," he said. "The future EVP. As in, the EVP." I froze. The board nodded. They weren't offering a new role. They were signaling succession. One day, maybe sooner than I expected, I would be the executive overseeing entire systems, operations, strategy. The person who steered the company, not just the division. The owner of the foundation I'd once had to defend alone. And I realized something as I walked home under the warm streetlights, the city alive around me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. This was the quiet power of proving yourself not to the people who doubted you, but to the world that needed what you could build. Legacy wasn't waiting for me someday. I was already living it. In the end, the real turning point didn't come with a promotion or a title. It came on a surprisingly ordinary Friday evening, long after most of the building had emptied. I was alone on the executive floor, reviewing the final integration reports for the expansion, reports that confirmed everything we'd built was working better than projected. Not perfect, but alive. Durable. Growing. My phone buzzed. A message from the CEO, board signed off. Formal announcement next week. Congratulations. I already knew what that meant. We'd been circling the conversation for weeks. Whispers. Hints. The COO's knowing smile. But seeing it in writing made something tighten and ease inside me all at once. I walked to the window. 20 floors up, the city lights looked like a living map, every flicker, every movement, every glow part of a system bigger than any one person. Bigger than ego. Bigger than petty politics. And standing there, overlooking that view, I felt the weight of my journey collapse into a kind of quiet truth. I had outgrown every limit ever placed on me. Not because of luck. Not because someone finally recognized my potential. But because I learned, painfully and stubbornly, how to build value no one could take away. My old CFO, the man who once believed authority could be inherited, was now just a name I barely thought about. His son was carving his own path, finally the right way. And the company that tried to sideline me had been absorbed into a larger machine where my ideas, not their politics, were shaping futures. The irony? The revenge I once thought I wanted had matured into something far more powerful: influence. Freedom. Legacy. I shut off the lights, grabbed my coat, and walked through the quiet halls I'd once navigated with caution, then with strategy, and now with complete ownership of who I'd become. People would read the announcement next week. They'd congratulate me. Some would be surprised. Some wouldn't. But I already knew the truth that mattered. I hadn't just earned a seat at the table. I built one. And as I stepped into the elevator, heading into the night and the life I'd crafted on my own terms, I felt a steady, grounded certainty settle in. The best revenge was never the downfall of others. It was the rise you built so firmly, so completely, that no one, ever again, could shake it. A rise that was mine. A legacy that would outlast me. And a future no one could take away.